I'm honored to have Michael at my right hand. Here we decided, but I'm at his right hand, depending on how you look at it. First of all, I apologize for starting late. That's all my fault. I happen to have one of those absolutely wonderful doctors who I had a medical checkup this morning, routine, and I forgot that he's a wonderful guy who actually wants to know how you're doing. And so, and he loves politics. And so I wouldn't change him for the world, but I should have factored that in. So I'm sorry we started a few minutes late. When Sally called me and asked me to do this with Michael Shawn, I absolutely could not resist. Michael Shawn is an extraordinary figure in our public conversation. He is a progressive who gets impatient with progressives sometimes about how they talk about and think about religion. He's a Catholic who gets impatient with the church sometimes about how they think and talk about politics. And he's a Christian who believes that Christianity has a role to play in public life, but sometimes gets upset with Christians in the way they play that role. Now, Michael Shawn is such an independent thinker that I could imagine his taking about 5 minutes to undermine the intellectual rationale behind each of those compliments. But don't do that. But we are here to talk about his great book. And I appreciated Peter's comments about how, in an odd way, the Falwell may have secularized Christianity rather than Christianizing or politics. I'd like to get to that, but I guess I just want to start with two basic questions. What is a Catholic boy from New England like you writing about Jerry Falwell? What drew you to Jerry Falwell? And if I could couple that with another question, putting aside your political critique of him, how did you feel about him as a human being at the end of all of your research? If you could put those two together.
First of all, it was suggested to me by a Jewish friend from New York. So I guess it was a totally interdenominational effort. But Leon Wieseltier approached me and he said, you wrote this book about Catholics and progressives, and that was well received. Maybe you should do a book about Republicans and conservatives. And he said, I keep waiting for a biography of Jerry Falwell to come into my office, and none has. And I thought about it for about 5 seconds and said, of course that's the next thing I should be working on. And in doing the research, most of which really was done at People for American Way, and I was so grateful for their archives being close and not having to trek down to Lynchburg every week, and my dogs wouldn't have liked that. Every day that I was working on this project, as somebody who cares very much about the intersection of religion and politics, every day was like waking up in a photographic negative. These were the issues I cared about, but everything was in the wrong place or reversed. That said, it was fascinating. I mean, this was a very consequential man. And as you alluded to, we're still living largely, I think, in his shadow, or at least the Republican Party is still largely living in his shadow. And so as I got involved in it, one of the things, from my historical training was to remember that this was his story, not my story. So, when you print or write, and quote something that he said that was very offensive, you don't have to say, oh, look how offensive that was. You don't, I didn't offer any criticisms in the book, except in the introduction and the epilogue, that were not contemporaneous. I mean, the man's dead, he's not here to defend criticisms from me. So either it was found, in real time as he was living his life, and therefore made its way into the book. But I wasn't interested in talking to people really about, in retrospect, looking back 30 years. I just don't think that's how history actually plays itself out. I regret not meeting him. He had this incredible capacity for friendship, which extended to people who were not like-minded, including Ted Kennedy, who went to Liberty to give a talk and had dinner with the family. And then a few months later, they're both in Florida, and Rose Kennedy was not doing well, and Jerry came up and prayed with Rose Kennedy, and they became friends. And when Jerry Jr. Went to law school, one of the letters of recommendation was written by Senator Kennedy. The most bizarre friendship, I think, to grow out of Falwell's life was with Larry Flynt. And they had this famous lawsuit that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And they had a kind of dog and pony show going where they go to college campuses to debate each other. And in addition to the kind of symbiotic relationship that often develops between ideological opponents, they found out that they enjoyed each other, and I think the initial occasion was one of their planes was having mechanical difficulty, and I think it was Larry who said to Reverend Falwell, "Well, I'll give you a ride in my plane," and then they said, "Well, you know, it's foolish for us to both have our planes at all these events," and then subsequently, every time he was in Los Angeles, Jerry Falwell would always visit Larry Flynt, who, when Falwell died, wrote this very moving tribute in the LA Times about, you know, we agreed on nothing, but he was my friend. So I regret not meeting him, but I will say, you know, one of the things that someone said to me as soon as I shared with them I was starting this project, they said, well, that should be interesting. I suppose the fact that he was loathsome is not the most interesting thing about him. So.
I'm now going to count on Michael to lend me his private plane whenever my private plane
Good
breaks
luck.
down. There's been a lot written before your book about how Falwell came to politics, and really, in some ways, he was recruited to politics. One thing I respect about Falwell is that he was quite honest in his autobiography in acknowledging that when Martin Luther King was doing his work and the Civil Rights Movement was doing its work, Falwell was deeply opposed to this as the politicization of Christianity. And he eventually just came right out and said, yeah, I'm wrong. He didn't pretend that there was no contradiction. But could you talk about the recruiting of Jerry Falwell? Because I think there is part of this that was sort of there was an outside catalyst from the Republican Party.
There really were, you know, and he had been dipping his toe in the political waters, starting in the 60s with picking up the anti-communist theme, starts making its way into his sermons. Then obviously with Roe v. Wade in 1973, he worked with Anita Bryant on the Miami-Dade gay and lesbian referendum, which was, you know, they won and defeated a civil rights plank. But it was in 1979 that a group of Republican operatives, Howard Phillips and Richard Viguerie, went to Lynchburg and said, we need you to galvanize your base. He was very resistant to do this, and he thought that his people in the pews were not ready for this and would react badly to his getting politically involved. Fundamentalists had a long, and Baptists before them, a long tradition and teaching called the spirituality of the church, that the church should not be involved in moral reformation. This was obviously, you know, has its roots going all the way back to the Reformation and the discussion between faith and works, but also was a direct response. Fundamentalism in the beginning of the 20th century was a response to the social gospel movement, which said private charity is, of course, incumbent upon Christians, but justice in society is also a part of the Christian vocation. And fundamentalism was formed very much in response to that creed of the social gospel movement. And so he had held this all of his life, and it was on that basis in 1965 he gave his famous Ministers and Marches speech attacking Dr. King for getting politically involved. Phillips and Viguerie came armed, however, with a poll. And the poll showed that the people in the pews of the evangelical and fundamentalist community were chomping at the bit to get politically involved, and that they felt, for a variety of reasons, that the kind of shared moral discourse that at least had left them to fly under the cultural radar screen was now being attacked, and that they could no longer assume that they would be safe in the kind of ghetto, and I don't use ghetto in a pejorative term at all, but that the institutions they had built, the schools, the churches, and then in Falwell's case, the university, could no longer protect themselves from the forces of the ambient culture, and so that they had to get politically involved if they were going to protect their niche, and then of course it went off into trying to reshape the entire American culture.
Could you talk about the Bob Jones case a bit in detail and how that sort of helped sort of galvanize this? It has some relevance to the moment.
I don't think the Jones case was actually, I think, after the forming of the moral majority. What preceded it was an IRS decision that segregated schools would to maintain their tax-exempt status in 1978. The IRS said that they would have to do more than simply have an anti-discrimination plank in their charter. They needed to, and that the burden of proof would be on the institution, not on the IRS. And this created such a groundswell of opposition that it really was the straw that broke the camel's back.